I was asked recently, somebody that was looking for very definitive answers about different parts of the Bible, and he was asking specifically about translations and how there can be differences in meaning between different translations. And so he gave me John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. And then he asked, am I not God's Son as well? Why does it say one and only? And he changed the translation to KJV, and he said, or in the KJV translation it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only begotten Son, which makes a little bit more sense from his perspective of, am I not God's Son as well? And he gave me a number of verses that had slightly different meanings depending on the translation. So I was just wondering how you combat different translations. Obviously, they're translated, so it can't be exact, but how do you go at having different translations?
So I actually view different translations as a blessing, not a problem. I think it's a good thing. I would say any translation, even the King James Bible, even though it was written hundreds of years ago, is a beautiful, good, sufficient translation to understand who God is and how he works in the world. Now, would I go to the King James Bible? No, for a few reasons. So it's not a bad thing. What we have to realize is when it's all said and done, it's the Greek that matters most, not the translations. Now you're like, I can't read Greek. Well, today there's great studies where you can actually go and have tools. I mean, I use Logos Bible software all the time. I love it. And you can get into the Greek, and it gives you possible meanings. So that's one thing that's important. Or go to a scholar and say, help me parse this. But we also have to be careful not to determine who Jesus was from one verse alone. So if all we had on Jesus was John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only Son, only begotten Son, and all we had was 3 different translations, that would be a problem about the identity of Jesus. But John is chock full from the first verse, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Jesus in John 8 says what? He says, before Abraham was born, I am, a reference to Exodus 3. In John 20:28, when the book climaxes, what does Thomas say when he realizes Jesus is risen from the grave? He says, my Lord and my God. Now, he's not going, oh my God. He is literally saying to Jesus, my Lord and my God. So if we keep the book of John and the rest of the Gospels in context, go back to the original language, then we begin to realize that these translation committees, NIV, ESV, NASB, might be written at different times. They might have different translation principles guiding them. So some translations are more word for word. Others are more thought for thought. And when you know what goes into those translations, and if you look at the beginning there'll always be a description. Get an NIV book or Bible, get an NASB, whatever. At the beginning, they'll tell you, here's who's on the committee, here's how we're translating this, and then you can go to those passages. So if I'm debating with somebody about John 3, I'm going to probably pull out 3 or 4 different translations. And I'm going to say, why do they translate it this way? What does it mean? What does the actual Greek say? And what does the rest of John teach about the identity of Jesus? That's going to help us understand that, yes, we are God's kids in a sense, God's children. And by the way, the Gospel of John makes it clear that we are adopted into being the children of God. Jesus was not adopted into being a son of God. He already existed before creation. So I love that you're having this theological debate. Keep it up. Just keep in mind translation principles, the original language, the context of the book, and then you'll have a lot more success interpreting John 3. And if that doesn't help, get a few commentaries and that'll flesh it out. But keep going. This is how you learn theology, by doing it. You're doing awesome.